So today we are outside of the the Summit. I got to correct myself. And it's a beautiful day, and I'm here with Randy Jennings. Hi, Randy.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
I'm so glad that you said you would do this. You are a longtime friend of my dad.
Yes.
And so I knew that I wanted to talk to you, but he was obviously like, you really should, because we were talking about newspapers.
Right.
One day we were talking about newspapers.com, and he goes, you really should sit down with Randy. He'd probably have a really cool story. And I was like, that's true. So we're here. It's Monday afternoon, and it's such a beautiful day. We had to come outside.
It is pretty. Not a cloud in the sky.
I know, and I'm sure tomorrow it'll be totally different. But so there's a lot of things that you've been involved with over your career being a journalist. But kind of tell us a little bit. I know you graduated from Grand Prairie High School.
Right.
Did you grow up in this town all the way from when you were a kid?
Yes, I was born and raised in Grand Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. We lived, when I was born, on the east side of town, over on Ruick Street.
Mm.
And then in 1960, we moved over to Finland Street, which is just north of I-30.
The ABC streets.
Yeah. It was a brand new addition at the time. And in fact, Grand Prairie city limits only went out to as far as Egyptian.
Really?
That was as far north as they went in that part of town.
Oh my gosh. Well, I lived off Westminster, which is just right off Egyptian and just north of Egyptian going north. So down from the Hanks and
Dorchester.
Yes, exactly.
And that didn't come until maybe 8 or 10 years after we built our house.
Wow, really?
Yeah, Dorchester came. That was a ladder, an upper scale from our houses, and it came a few years later.
So what was up there? Was it just field? Ahead north
where our house was, there was a thing called Breezy Hill Manor, and on top of the hill there was a old styled maybe like some kind of a southern plantation type house on top.
Are you serious?
And then everything else was a field. And where Carrier Parkway comes down now, anything to the west when we built our house, there was nothing there.
Nothing there, right.
And the Breezy Hill Manor house was on top of that part of the addition, and it kind of overlooked the lower part there. It was an interesting time. Carrier Parkway, there was not a bridge over Carrier Parkway on I-30, so they put Carrier there, but there was almost no traffic at all because there was nowhere to go until they built the bridge.
Was I-30 there?
I-30 was there. But Carrier, when they built the addition, the only way to get to our houses was underneath 30 on 7th Street.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, you could have come, I guess, back way on Egyptian, but as far as Carrier Parkway, there was no access. So they built the road to eventually connect to the other part of Carrier, but they didn't have the money for the bridge, I guess.
I was talking to Bonnie Cockrum, and she was talking about that area of houses between Hill and, I guess it was. It ended right there by just south of 30. There's that whole stretch of Carrier houses that all face Carrier.
Right.
She's like, that's a historic strip, because those houses have been there for a really long time.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And she was like, we need to get like a landmark over there. I was like, that's a really interesting point. I know that area has a lot of history in the town.
Right. And Carrier used to end right there. I know where Bonnie lived, and they were on the last stretch before it ended.
Oh, right. So you grew up, so that was where you lived, and then you went to Grand Prairie High School, and you graduated in 71.
71.
Yeah. So have you always had an interest in writing? Like, have you always wanted to be that kind of a career?
And I can think back when I was, I would have been 11 years old, and for my birthday, I got a subscription to Sports Illustrated. And I tell you, the Sports Illustrated came on Friday, and I just couldn't wait to get out of school and see the magazine.
So, has it always been the sports part of things?
Yeah. And it really started in, I think either the 1st or 2nd grade. I read a book, one of the first books I read. It must have been the 3rd grade, because I wasn't reading a book in the 1st grade. But it was like there was several books written about athletes that, as far as their childhood and everything. And this was about Babe Ruth.
Oh.
And it was I checked it out of the school library, it had the books on the shelves right there.
Right.
Not really a library, just a room library.
Right.
And I wanted it so bad, I even sent off and got a copy of the book, and I still have it.
Oh, how neat!
And it was the Babe Ruth story, and it was written for somebody that's in the third or fourth grade.
Oh, wow.
And I still remember that book had a big impact on me. Then I started reading all the books that were written about sports in middle school library. Dwayne Decker was a guy that wrote a lot of books. You know, the young guys, the hero of the team, or the ace of the bullpen, or whatever.
Right.
And I would read those too. They made a big impact on me. Sports Illustrated, though, getting that first edition.
Oh, yeah.
And then shortly after that, there was a story written by a guy named Dan Jenkins. He only passed away in the last 6 months. Very big hero of mine. He wrote a story about playing golf in Fort Worth called The Glory Game at Goat Hills.
Uh-huh.
That landed Sports Illustrated, and that was a huge impact on me. I'll tell you this, I played in a media golf tournament in Fort Worth probably about 10 years ago. Dan Jenkins was standing at the bar.
Oh, wow.
And I went up to him and I said, I want to tell you, Dan, that your writing had a big influence on my decision to become a sports writer. He looked right at me and says, I'm so sorry.
Where have I seen his name? Because I know that I've seen it several places.
He'd written many books called Semi-Tough. Many of his books turned into movies.
Okay. Then I think I must have seen it in Dad is yeah.
Yeah, he wrote for Sports Illustrated for a long time, and then wrote these books. He would pop up occasionally in Golf Magazine. He wrote a lot of golf.
Yeah.
He'd be on, I think, Golf Digest. He was a regular contributor. Just fantastic, funny guy, Fort Worth guy all the way.
Right. So when you got into high school, tell me the name of the newspaper for the Grand Prairie High School.
Prairie Dog.
The Prairie Dog, that's right.
Prairie Dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and the Prairie Dog there's parts of it that were published in the Grand Prairie Daily News, weren't there? Didn't they take certain things that they wrote? Because I feel like I've either came across like special articles or things.
It was probably plagiarism. It was probably somebody at the Prairie Dog writing what was writing in the Grand Prairie paper.
Oh, that's funny.
No, you may be right. I don't know. When I was there, we had Miss Sullivan was the sponsor. She was great. She was fantastic. And she, high school kids, especially doing the news, they're real rebellious and they want to shake the school up and everything. And, because they're only going to be there a couple of years.
Right.
The sponsor's going to be there a little bit longer.
Right.
So she's constantly trying to tone them down. We had a staff, several girls, just brilliant girls. Cheryl Kinsey, I can't think of all of them, but the editors, Angela Crouch, very, very smart, and they really cared about the newspaper. I did the sports. I was like a sports writer my junior year, and the sports editor was Steve Conner. And then the next year, and Mike Campbell worked with us also. There was three of us. The next year, I was a sports editor because they'd graduated, and it was a good experience.
I bet.
We wrote the paper, and then one day, I think we came out every 2 weeks. And on Thursday, we would go over to Arlington, at the Arlington Citizen Journal, and they would paste our paper up, and we would oversee the way they did it to make sure everything was done correctly, and we had to make the cuts and so forth to make the paper fit. And so we would go over as a staff. It would be the editors, maybe 4 or 5 of us, Cheryl and Angela. So it was we were getting out of school and we were moving around basically.
So, and you at that time you only went into high school as 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, right?
Right.
So you said, did you really get involved in your junior and senior year? Really?
Probably more than I should have. I wasn't a very good student. I probably should have been at school all those days I was missing.
Well, I just interviewed, Robin Brown just came and did an interview, and he graduated with my mom, but, he was talking about just the sports teams at that time from Grand Prairie High School, like how good of athletes they all were.
Right.
And you know, I know that my dad was a football player, and, you know, there's a few guys, basketball players and all that stuff. So were y'all all friends before that happened?
I'd say, you know, back then, I'd say the Adams guys were pretty much friends with the Adams people. And it was a little bit harder to, I don't know why, but thinking back on it, of course, we all eventually melted into the pot. But,
right.
But I think at first you were just more friends with the people you knew already from Adams, and the people. Eventually, you figured out, hey, these people are just like us. And you fit in. You know, one thing that's tremendously different now, thinking back on it, than our senior year. Whomever the star tennis player was on the girls' side was almost automatically going to be most athletic, because that was the only sport a girl could play at Grand Prairie High School.
Really?
My senior year, 1971.
Really?
Can you believe that? I mean, now when you think about all the sports the girls have, they had nothing.
Wow.
They'd only had a drill team for like 3 or 4 years by the time we were in school. Maybe less than that by the time we actually were sophomores. Maybe just a year or two. Grand Prairie was, I mean, for female athletes, it was terrible. I mean, Duncanville would have had girls basketball, but they would have played in like the AAU league.
Mm-hmm.
Grand Prairie, I've been told, had a team back in the 40s or 50s. Because one time I wrote a story about this is going to be the first ever Grand Prairie basketball game, and one of the ladies said, "Oh no, we used to play in the 40s." So I never found that documented, but I've heard that.
That's very interesting. I was also talking to, I guess, Mom. I don't know who I was talking to, but we were talking about the first North-South game. And when
football?
It was just the first game that there ever was a Gopher Warrior, and apparently it was a flag football game, a girl flag football game that Dad coached, but it was after y'all graduated. It was, I think, right?
The first game would have been a baseball game at South Grand Prairie, as far as I know. I went to the game. This would have been 1969-70, the year South opened.
Oh,
They played a baseball game.
Okay.
But, you know, football, they didn't play until 74. They went 5 years before they played a football game, which really was a bad idea as it turned out, because all it did was make the rivalry fester, you know? I mean, it really wasn't good to not let them play right off the bat.
Right, that's true.
They were playing in baseball and basketball. Basketball maybe took a couple of years, but they played the baseball game the very first year.
So did you know when you were going to sit down and watch that game that you knew how the Gophers and Warriors were going to be like competitive with each other?
You know, I don't remember being really bad blood at that time. I mean, I think we knew the guys that were at the other school. It wasn't.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, that first year, because they gave everybody an option of which school they wanted to go to. So, we didn't have any animosity, I don't think, towards it. Grew later, though. Right. It was really bad later on, and I don't know what we could have done about it by then. I mean, it had gotten out of hand. The hatred was, you know, number one were for our team, and number two were for whoever the other team played.
Right, exactly.
That seemed to be the temperament at Grand Prairie for a long time.
Yeah.
That made it hard to be a sports editor, because they're constantly looking to see, well, you know, how much you writing on this team or how much you writing on that team. If both teams are good or both teams were bad, it wouldn't be an issue. If one team was good and one was bad.
Right.
That's when you get into trouble.
Right. So after you get out of, like, well, I guess first, when you go to be a sports writer, how much do you really, really need to know about sports to be a sports writer?
Well, I thought that was more important than knowing how to write. I think obviously that's not the case. I really love sports. I mean, I was thinking back on it, I was way overboard on what I should have been doing. I should have been going to school more or paying more attention to school. But my number one activity was either watching sports or playing. I mean, way too much into it. I think now somebody was getting into it now, I think, you know, is not as important now as it was then. I think you can paint around the edges a little more now.
Yeah.
See, back then there was no ESPN, There was no. There was one baseball game on a week. When we were going there.
Oh, wow.
There was a game on Saturday afternoon, and that was it. I mean, Major League Baseball. The Cowboys, none of their home games were shown. They would show their road games, but that'd be like 7 games a year.
They wouldn't show their home game. They wouldn't. They just assumed the entire DFW Metroplex.
They were blacked out, but they couldn't even fill the Cotton Bowl. They couldn't come close to filling the Cotton Bowl. So the games were blacked out, and we had to buy a ticket to see the game. They thought they would encourage attendance by not showing the game.
There was a time when the Cowboys couldn't even sell out the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, they could. There were 30,000 people there. Well, at one time, in 1960, 61, 62, when there were 2 teams, the AFL, Dallas Texans, and the Cowboys.
Oh, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, neither one of them could draw a crowd, and the big joke was they were going to play each other, and the winner got to leave town, you know. It was that bad. The Texans wound up losing and moving to Kansas City, of course. But back then, the Cowboys were not a good team, and they didn't draw.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the Cotton Bowl would fill up for Texas OU, but other than that, you know, SMU didn't draw big crowds over there. Dallas really supports a winner, you know.
Very true, very true. Was there a baseball team at that? Was the Rangers?
No. The Rangers didn't come in until 72.
Okay.
So we were out of high school by the time the Rangers came.
You didn't have a basketball team?
There was an ABA team. Back our high school year, my brother-in-law, Randy Galloway, was the beat writer for the Dallas Chaparrals. It was an ABA team. And I used to get tickets. I'd call Randy. I'd say, hey, Randy, got about 4 tickets tonight. There wasn't any problem getting tickets. I mean, there was never anybody there. They played at first Memorial Auditorium, and then they went and played at SMU. Maybe some at Lowe's Fieldhouse at the end. He was great about getting us tickets, and pretty soon the ticket manager, I just started calling her. I just bypassed her name was I think Susan Baker. And I would call her, and you know, I'm 16, 17 years old, and asked for 4 tickets, and we would drive over. Johnny Andrews was our wheelman. His mom had a nice Caprice. And we would go Chuck Malone, Paul May, those people. I'm not sure your dad ever went. I think he was probably too involved with football or whatever.
Maybe. By that time, maybe he was at, well, I don't know. If you were 16 or 17, he hadn't left for college yet.
We had some times. We really did. It was a lot of fun. So there was a team, and they were fun to watch, but the ABA didn't last. Now that team became the San Antonio Spurs.
Oh, okay.
That Dallas Chaparrals team moved down to San Antonio.
I gotcha.
Did a lot of winning after that.
Yeah. So after you graduated from high school, where'd you go to college?
I went to UTA, and but the last few years I was in UTA quite a while. Foreign language was my problem. To get a degree in journalism, you needed 4 semesters of foreign language, and I could not see at that time how that was going to help me. So in the meantime, I had gotten the article with the Grand Prairie paper, 1975, and I wasn't really as thrilled about getting a degree. I finally wound up getting it, but I think I took the last 4 semesters at Northlake College.
Oh, right.
Switched the hours over to UTA, and I was able to escape.
So, and then you went over so how was it going from being in a high school setting versus, like, I know you were in a big publication. I mean, it was a Grand Prairie publication, and it was a Grand Prairie publication. It wasn't like it was Arlington's version of Grand Prairie. It was the Grand Prairie Daily News, right?
Right. There was a chain of papers called DFW Suburban News. There were 7 papers. Grand Prairie was one. We published 6 days a week, every day but Saturday. We had an office on Main Street, right next to Jack in the Box, on West Main, East Main, and it was great. I mean, I loved it. I worked there. I was in that building for 11 years. It was centrally located, so people could drop stuff off at the newspaper, which was good. One of the bad things, though, it was an afternoon paper. I don't know if you remember that or not.
No. Because the paper closed down pretty much in my youth. I don't even remember reading it whenever I was a kid. Because when was it done? It was.
Well, when it closed, It closed in 2000. I worked 25 in January of 2000. I was there 25 years.
That was way after I thought it was. So I was an adult. Like I was 20 when it closed down, but I don't remember reading it.
The publication dates gradually, they were smaller and smaller. Went from 6 days a week until I would say about 88, and then they decided we were going to go to 4 days a week, and then around 1990, I think it went to 2 a week. So it was we were always having to lose staff personnel, and we were always having to cut back. In 1986, we moved from downtown. We moved to 1000 Avenue H in Arlington, the Great Southwest, and that's where the plant was. That's where the presses had moved. When we first started, the presses were on Midway, off Midway Road on Alpha, north of 635.
Right.
And that was the gathering point for all the papers sent their information there. When we started, this was 6 day a week paper. We used an IBM Selectric typewriter. When you typed it on a page, if there was an error or mistake, you took a little black felt pen and pushed through the error. And the paper was all those pages were sent to the plant over on Midway, and then those pages were sent through a scanner. And supposedly all the errors were supposed to be picked up, but it was the worst system in the world. Mistakes would come through, and I mean, you drew your line too thick, or your line wasn't long enough, and you would have some kind of excuse. It was horrible. And I'd say somebody around 1980, we went to the TRS, the Trash 80 computers, the very first version they had. And these we would put a disc in the computer and type in and do your story. Now, the one thing you didn't ever want to see was disk error, dose error 5 or dose error 22. Because when that happened, I mean, everything you did was lost.
Oh, no, gosh.
There was one classic night when Greg Goffin, he got a dose error 22 on his little black, it was a black little computer disc. He pulled that thing out and threw it as hard as he could. We had a foam ceiling, and the thing just stuck right in the ceiling. We moved out of that office 5 years later. That thing was still.
Oh my gosh! God, that would be so frustrating. I can't even. Man,
you have no idea. I mean, when you saw that dose error 22, well, when you got all the stories written back then, instead of having to send the paper over, we took the disc and we sent it to the plant. And every story had to go. So it took about 20, 25 minutes to send the whole page over that way. And if it ever stopped, you had to start all over again.
Oh my gosh.
So it would click and it would run and stop. And then click and run. Well, if it ever stopped and didn't start running again, you're starting all over.
It's like technology brings so much good, but there's that period of time where it's like, at least with the typewriter, you don't lose your entire thing that you typed. It might have been kind of a pain to take over the thing to get it printed, but gosh, that would be, the early version of the internet, trying to get all that sent over. And
our page dummy, you had to send a page dummy to let them know where the stories were supposed to go. And did you ever see the movie Bullet with Steve McQueen?
No, but I've heard about it.
There's a scene late in the movie where they're waiting to see a picture of a guy that the FBI is sending. And they use the same thing. That's why we use the same thing that we did. You put the page on a piece of paper. Put the piece of paper into this machine, and it starts turning. And somehow that starts turning here, and it shows up there,
Oh my gosh!
That same thing. It's so backward now. Now it would take like one click, and you would have be there. But you're waiting like 5 minutes for the page, and they're all standing around waiting to see what the guy looks like. That reminds me of those days.
Oh man!
Pages.
So when you started in the 70s, and you were doing sports for them from the very beginning.
Right.
What kind of games would you cover? Would you only do Grand Prairie, or there wasn't that many to do?
75. When I started, the first thing I did was we covered summer league baseball. I got hired in the summer. The position I was taking was Robert Mitchell's.
Okay.
Robert Mitchell wound up going to South Grand Prairie and becoming the newspaper editor and the annual sponsor.
Oh, okay.
But before he went to South, he was finishing up his school, and he was helping Gene. Gene Abrahamson was the sports editor, and so he was helping Gene out. My ex-brother-in-law, Billy Langston, his mom was she worked as like an accountant for her in the financial end of the paper, and she told Billy that somebody was leaving, and they were in sports. Billy knew I was going to try looking for a sports writing job, so that's how I wound up talking to Gene and taking the job. So we worked together for 7 years. The way we did it back then, Gene would decide. Basically, he wanted to stay close to home as he could, because he was also doing darkroom work and so forth. So to get him back to the office quicker would have made it better for us to be getting out of there and save us a few minutes of time.
Right.
So a lot of times in that situation, I would do the road games, he would do the home games.
Gotcha.
That's how we did it for a long time. Then when Greg, let's see, what happened after that was Gene he just got tired of working nights, so he became the police reporter, and he got out of sports. I was the sports editor then, and when that happened, Kevin Casey, who's a South Grand Prairie grad, he came to work for us for 2 years. He's now a teacher in Coppell.
Oh.
Yeah. He has been for like 25 years. Still a good friend. And then when he decided to leave, Greg Goffinette was at the Mid-Cities paper. And Mid-Cities covered Bell, Trinity, Halton, and Richland. And I knew Greg still had Grand Prairie roots. He was either going to get married or already married to a Grand Prairie lady. So that would be close for him. So he came back, and we worked together for, say, 5 or 6 years. Greg passed away about 5 or 6 years ago with cancer. We had a lot of fun together. So those were good days. Now, when we moved out of our office in Grand Prairie and moved to Arlington, it was both places were 1.7 miles from our house.
Nice.
But that didn't keep me from complaining about leaving Main Street. I still didn't like going out there. But it turned out, the way they did it out there, they put all the sports editors in one room. So we had 4 sports editors, all the sports editors and their assistants. So we had 8 guys. And to this day, we still get together.
Oh, I bet you do.
We had I'm telling you, we had a lot of laughs.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how much work we got done, but we had a lot of laughs. We had one guy that kept a log of stupid things people said.
Oh, my gosh.
There's over 300 entries. And we always bring that thing up.
Y'all need to write a book.
We get together. I'm telling you, the stories wouldn't mean much to most people, but all we have to do is see 1 or 2 words and we just start laughing. I know exactly where that's going.
Well, you were telling me before we kind of started talking, you were telling me that one of the biggest parts of the paper was the wedding announcements.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, it was I think they called it either the women's editor or the society editor. Something like that. Writing a wedding was a big deal. I mean, they would put the flowery words in there. They described the wedding dress. And,
yep.
It was huge. I mean, you could not make mistakes on the wedding. I mean,
right.
If it came out wrong, somebody had trouble on Monday. Because Sunday was the day when the weddings ran.
Right.
And then, Monday would be the day when whoever was unhappy.
Uh-oh, you're getting trash talked over here. But like, it's interesting because if you go back through the paper, and I mean all the way through, really since I think the Grand Prairie Daily News, when I saw it went back all the way to 1908. But there was always a societal part of the paper. The newspaper was an announcement to a lot of people about what you were doing. What's so funny to me, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but like I look at people now and everybody's like, oh, everybody's so attached to Facebook. Everybody wants to be attached to Facebook. If you go back and read papers, it was literally like, Mr. and Mrs. Randy Jennings are going to Dallas to go visit Mr. and Mrs. David Pecor, and they're going to have a dinner of prime rib tonight. That's what they would do. And when you talk about the flowery stuff, I was reading something the other day, and it was like, Mrs. Randy Jennings had the study club over at her house, and she used green and pink to decorate the table and like all this stuff. And I'm like, people want to act like things have changed. No, that was just the Facebook of y'all's generation.
Well, you're right. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was probably more information than you needed.
Because people had to physically take those stories to you, didn't they? Or did people call in, or what did they do?
Oh yeah, people wanted to see their name in the paper. That's never changed.
Right, right.
And so there was really any way you could get names in the paper was good.
Right.
You wanted to. I mean, from my point of view, little league results. Some kid got 2 hits. Let's put his name in the paper. That was a big part of a small town paper. It's not just covering the high school team, because obviously that's what most people are interested in. But everybody's got a stake in like the soccer results. Not everybody, but most people were either going to play soccer or youth basketball or play stuff in the middle school. When I thought we had a really good connection with the middle schools when Marvin Crawford became superintendent in the 80s. Because he came to me one day and he says, what can we do on our end to make it better for you so that you can get this stuff in the paper? And I said, hey, I know these guys are busy. I know they have an unbelievable amount of stuff to do. But if they could, somehow just get the results to it, if they could put somebody in charge of it.
Just the coaches.
And from that point on, once he took the initiative, it was great cooperation, and we were able to get. I had other of our papers in chain going. How are you getting that stuff? How are you getting them to send it in? And I said, well, I've got a superintendent that's interested in it. He wants to send names in the paper.
Yes, and that's so important. And it even went so far. There'd be times that there would be, again, this is just me reading, the digitized versions online, but it was. The SGP, or the Grand Prairie High School Booster Club moms hosted the football team over after this particular thing, or they had their end of the season banquet, or so there was a lot more of it than just the play. It was a community thing, and it was always nice when I go back through and I see pictures and I see all that stuff. Me as a person now, it puts a lot of personality into what was going on at the time.
It wasn't all fluff too, because when I joined the paper in '75, there was a city person that covered the council. There was a person that covered the school board. It was a strictly school board job. So these people had time to meet, go to the meetings, and come back and analyze things, and they got to know the council people real well, or the school board people. And there was a lot of controversy in Grand Prairie on both of those issues. Back then, and you never hear anything now. Of course, we don't have a paper, but
I'm going to talk to you about this because, yes, go on, continue.
But there were some council meetings that lasted till 2 in the morning. I know because it was on Tuesday night, and that would be a big night for high school sports, and I'd still be up there. And I'd hear the lowdown from the city reporter. He'd walk in and he'd say, "You're never going to believe what went on tonight," And so, those days, the Grand Prairie was either trying to get rid of the city manager, or there was some kind of rift between council. I mean, it just seemed like Grand Prairie was explosive, and this wasn't true of all the other cities. I mean, Grand Prairie was unique in that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. No, the other city reporters were like, we don't have anything like that, but Grand Prairie was.
Do you feel like it was just more passionate for the town, or what do you think? It was just conflict of personalities?
No, I because I wasn't anywhere else, I'm not sure. It just seemed like Grand Prairie people just didn't get along sometimes, and they wound up trying to work together. It wasn't easy. We had one councilman, I won't say his name, but he used to come into the office on Wednesdays, the day that the paper would come after the Tuesday night council meeting, and he would, with the city reporter sitting there knowing that he's there, kind of looking over his this guy pulled a paper out and said, well, that's not right. I didn't say that. I mean, it was not comfortable. I mean, everybody in there was cringing, you know. But the councilman was a friend of the publisher. He just do it.
Man, were the people that were the reporters for that? Were they actually into politics, or was that just the short straw that they drew?
Well, city reporter was the #1 reporter job at the paper.
It was. Okay.
That's what you strive to be at the time. I mean, if you were at the paper, you wanted to be the editor, but then you also, if you were a reporter, you wanted to be the city reporter. The school board reporter, not so much. I mean, they had to do a lot more school type stories, and not quite as exciting, I guess, as the city stuff.
Yeah, well, I would imagine they would have to write a lot more stuff that wasn't fun to write that people would be excited about reading the next day.
Yeah, and they were important though. I mean, I think the way we did it was correct. I mean, we had a full-time photographer too, and then many editors. I mean, we went through editors like you would not believe. Gene Abrahamson, the sports editor, and I tried to count out one time how many editors we had been through from 75 until 2000. It was tons.
Really?
But there were some very good ones. And one of the first ones that I had as an editor was Larry Powell. He was great and wound up going to the morning news and went to it for a long time. And then I want to say at the end, Herb Booth, fantastic guy.
I've seen his name.
He's at UTA. He's another person you should talk to.
Really?
He was at the end, towards the end, and Patrick Waskovich. We had probably 4 or 5 that were outstanding. Ruth Ann Brockway was another one. But we had some that lasted a day or two.
Really?
Yeah.
So
we had one that caught him smoking grass out of his car. On the second day on the job, they turned him loose.
Was it after a school board meeting? He's like, I can't take this.
Well, he was the editor. I mean, all he had to do was read the story. Maybe the story sent him over the edge.
He's like, nope.
I can't take this 2 days into it, you know.
So were a lot of the people from the paper, were they all from Grand Prairie?
No, very, very few were, really. In fact, I wound up always trying to defend Grand Prairie from the criticism that everybody else had about it. You know, the rest of them were all complaining about it. No, these Grand Prairie people are, they're crazy. You know. I said, no, they're not. I mean, there's reasons why they don't want the highway to go through town. Or,
right.
I was trying to tell them that Grand Prairie wasn't. It was a great place. They didn't buy into it.
Well, it's hard, because everybody has got their own. Every town has its own culture and all that stuff, and so it's like when you're not from that town, you don't get it. You just don't get it, and you don't have the history to really understand like why this is the way that it is.
Yeah.
There's a benefit to being a reporter that has no personal ties. There's a benefit to being a reporter that does have personal ties. So, do you feel like it was a service that y'all had people that were reporting on stuff like school board and things that weren't? Do you feel like that was a good thing for the town?
I think overall it probably was.
Yeah.
I mean, to have a newspaper is very important.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, we're losing it. We've lost it here. We've lost all this. That entire chain that I was telling you about, the suburban paper chain, none of them exist today. They're all out of business. The morning news, Belo which owns the morning news, and they really didn't know what to do with it. I think somewhere along the line there was a survey that they had done, and the guy had said, well, one of the most valuable things you have is these papers, these small suburban papers. But I don't know that Belo really ever thought that. Journalistically, it wasn't in the morning news class,
Right.
Morning news was not, and they didn't really like being associated with these papers. One by one, they started closing them and started kind of feeding them into the Dallas paper, try to make the Dallas paper bigger. Of course, and also at the same time, journalism was taking a gigantic hit because you had the online taking away classified ads, so people didn't normally have to spend money to get stuff in the morning news and classifieds. they were starting to print stories online. So all of a sudden now the stories are older when they actually come in the paper. They're not up to date. People could see them instantaneously online.
Plus, they had television that was starting to probably cover a lot more local stuff.
But television was never gonna. I don't know. Yeah, I would say that's.
But at least they could see the
true.
Highlights at a certain point of a game where they couldn't see it before.
True. But the morning news was still strong in the late '90s. I mean, it was still going pretty strong, even with television. But the internet, it was a killer for. And then they made 2 or 3 just gigantic financial mistakes that cost them millions. One of them was they had the food channel, and they didn't know what they had with the food channel, but they decided to kind of swap the food channel and start their own KXTA Texas News deal, which they built a big studio for. That thing was in business about 2 or 3 years and went bankrupt.
Are we talking about the food channel?
What is it?
Are we talking about the food channel?
Yeah.
Like that grew into the food channel?
The morning news owned the food channel.
Oh my gosh!
I'm telling you, talk about financial mistakes. That's like. Not only did they lose money from that's still making money.
Sorry, God, I can't believe
they lost. They lost all the money they put into the studio that was built behind the morning news. I just sat empty until the end.
Wow, that is crazy. That
was just one of them. Another one was this thing called the Q-Cap. The Q-Cap was going to be a device where you could rub it over the paper and it would tell you some kind of information. It was supposed to make the newspaper internet savvy, so you could read the paper on your computer by just scanning over the paper. I don't know how they sold this bill of goods, but this was another $1 million mistake.
Why would you need that if you have the paper in front of you?
That's a good question. I still have a brand new Q-Cap. So somebody wants to. I think it may be worth something. It was worth $1 million at one time. The third thing they did was this affected us in Grand Prairie. They decided it was this was going to be the last newspaper war ever in the United States, I think. They decided they were going to go into Arlington Morning News. They were going to start that paper. Arlington Daily News was in our chain. They closed that paper, and they were going to make a really strong paper in Arlington. I can't tell you how many people have tried to make Arlington and lost. I mean, it's just hard to do. The Star Telegram pretty much had a foothold in Arlington. The Arlington Morning News comes along, and they're going to spend as much money as it takes. This was in about 96 or 97. It didn't work. I mean, Arlington Morning News wasn't making much more headway than what the Arlington Daily News had been making before when they put out of business. So what they decided to do was, we're going to make it look like we're expanding. We're going to start throwing Arlington Morning News in Grand Prairie. And so we're going to start covering Grand Prairie. Well, they're owned by the same company that owns us. So now I'm in competition with what I consider to be competition with Arlington, because they got people that are covering Grand Prairie events.
Well, yeah, especially if they're giving money to it, if they're throwing money at it. Of course they are.
And then because they had so much money put into it, then the day of reckoning came when I was talking to one of our adult girls, and she said, "Yeah, they got us trying to spend half our time selling for the Grand Prairie paper and half selling for the Arlington Morning News. How are we going to stay in business?"
Wow.
And we didn't.
No.
They closed us down. They were good enough to put most of the Grand Prairie staff on the Arlington Morning News staff, but man, for me, that was like a black day. When they told us the paper was gone. It was 90 years old.
Wow.
Ruthie Jackson insisted on having a 90th anniversary party for the paper. Well before it was known we were going to close. And I think we had it at the Women's Building or something like that. A lot of people showed up. It was very nice. And somebody says, "Why in the world would you do 90? Why not wait for 100? I said, "I don't know if there's going to be 100. I think she was smart to do 90.
The hard part about, when I was talking to Bonnie, Harkham over at the historical organization. And one thing I'm just curious about how this is all going to work out. When you're archiving stuff for historical purposes, a paper is a very good way to do that.
Right.
And when I go through, and now when they've digitized the newspapers, what they'll do is, you don't have the words that you do on the internet, like on an internet screen where you can just type in a word and it's searching. Someone actually has to go in and put that word. There's a field over that word, so that if I was to search up Randy Jennings, there would be fields on top of your name so that I could search through a paper. That takes time, but there's a centralized place where I can find information that was reported on things at the time. Now, with there being Facebook, that's great. People are getting the information now. What I'm curious about is how that's going to affect archival stuff of what are we going to have that's of substantial in our hands to look at, moving forward of what's happening now. So I don't know how the internet's going to affect that, but I just think about that and I'm like, there was value in seeing a typewritten page. There was value in seeing, those things and the misprints and all that stuff. That makes a difference.
Right.
And so I mean, you've watched it grow and kind of take over. You're still right.
Right.
So who do you write for now?
Dallas Morning News, mostly at this time of year. I've also do stuff for Max Preps in football season. It's owned by CBS, and they're out of California, but they are very interested in Texas high school football. So I've worked for them for several years. I did work for ESPN for 3 or 4 years. They started. They were going to come in with the idea of 4 cities they were going to put local coverage into. It was going to be Boston, New York, Chicago. I guess maybe not Chicago. Dallas for sure. Yeah, Chicago. I guess there were 5. Dallas was one of them. But unfortunately, and the guy they put in charge of Dallas was a guy named Barry Vigoda, who was a good friend of mine at the Morning News. And so I did a lot of high school stuff for him. And then I'd help out on things like the Rangers or the golf tournament, that sort of stuff. So I did a lot. The Ranger writer was a guy named Richard Durrett, and he was making the road trips at the time. And so when the team would come home, that's when he would take a few days off, and I'd cover a lot of home games. Richard passed away very suddenly. It was a surprise. I mean, he was only like 35 years old.
Oh, wow. In
good shape. I mean, just horrible. So aneurysm or something.
Oh, that is my biggest fear. I'm not gonna lie. Like just the things that just happen just like that.
It just shocked everybody. Very nice guy.
So how did you know? So as you've gone over, like how have you noticed the differences between? Because I guess you're still writing for print media,
right.
but.
And I do stuff for the Morning News right now, which goes up on the internet, and then there's also, it basically goes 2 ways. The internet people look at it, put a headline on it, put it up right away. It can go the other way to the news side then, and somebody else reads it, and they put a headline on it. It's done for the paper. So everything has to be set in to 2 different areas of the paper.
Oh, wow. Did you notice that your headlines had to change once the internet started?
The headlines are definitely different. the people doing the internet, and I mean, I have nothing against them. I like them, but they tend to be younger, and they tend to be. They're trying to grab attention.
Right.
They're trying to get a click. Right. So the headlines on the internet tend to be. You kind of cringe sometimes. I mean, most of the time they're all right. Every now and then, I'd ask a guy a question, and I'd put his answer in the story, and the headline would say something like, "Coach opens up about something." He didn't really open up. I just asked him a question, and he answered it.
Oh yeah. I listened to a podcast from a guy that was, I can't even remember who it was, but they were talking about how the headlines. There's a person that's at some of these online websites, the bigger ones, whose job is literally just to put headlines onto articles. And the whole point is to, for search engine optimization and to get clicks on that link. And so when the journalists would actually read the article or read the headline, they were like, that is not at all what that article is about. Did the person that did the headline even read it? Or and so that's kind of upsetting because it's, There was a period with journalistic integrity. I don't know where that's
That's
going.
always gone on a little bit. I mean, there's always been bad headlines. Even because the way it's set up, the writer. Now at the Grand Prairie paper, I wrote the story and I wrote the headline. I got nobody to blame but myself. but even before the internet, you'd see a headline and go, it's really not what I really would have put up there. I know what they're trying, but that didn't work. What aggravates me more than that now is these things, these terms, they try to act like they're really in vogue, and they'll say so and so throws shade over somebody. Throws shade, come on. They're supposed to be. I guess they're supposed to be hip, but that's probably another sign of me being on the 60 and over end.
No, I mean, when you think about words, oh man, you go back and read some of the papers back in the days of some of the ways that the words that they use, and you just kind of cringe, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they would use those words, but back then it didn't mean anything,
Hopefully it wasn't my school.
No, because I bet you probably in the digitized versions, like I said, it only went to 77, so you're probably only in the last couple of years that I had on the page, but we actually only have a couple minutes left. But I wanted to ask you, in your time specifically in the local paper, like what was the most explosive or crazy thing that y'all had to report on? Not you necessarily, maybe, but just somebody. What was the most difficult thing?
I can tell you. This probably not exactly what you're asking, but I do want to say. I've never had a team go to state that wins state. In Grand Prairie that I covered, but I had somebody that got very close, and so I was thinking the other day, what would be the greatest team? Well, in football, it was the '99 South Grand Prairie team. They were within one bad spot at the end of the game of going to the state championship game. They got hosed on a bad fourth down spot. It allowed Garland to make a first down. Garland went down and kicked the field goal, and they eventually won in overtime. If South Grand Prairie, if the ball spotted correctly, South Grand Prairie would have run the clock out. The game would have been over, and they would have won by 3 points. And they would have won the state championship game. Still makes me sick to this day.
I was gonna say, did it break your heart?
Yeah. And that was also in the last 2 months of the paper. That would have been the end of the paper in another 2 months.
Wow.
Another month, actually. That was in December. 1995 Grand Prairie baseball team went to the state tournament. That was the Kerry Wood team, and the guy that wound up being the #1 draft choice, the Chicago Cubs. And they looked like they were going to be a state champion. But there was a lot of controversy about the team. They had a lot of move-ins. The coach had pitched Kerry Wood both ends of a doubleheader, which got a lot of bad publicity. And they went down to Austin and they lost in the semifinals. Those two. The South Grand Prairie softball team also made it to state, and they got beat in the semifinals of their softball team. I was at that game as well. I missed 1974 South Grand Prairie state championship baseball team by actually 2 seasons. So that they won and I missed it.
Wow.
But they went to state my very first year at the paper, 75, 76, and they got beat in the finals.
Oh, man.
And they got beat. So I was so close to a state champion, but I never could quite get there.
Do you remember off the top of your head any one particular play that just stood out to you in your time of reporting?
I'm glad you asked that because I thought of that too. I thought I had 1987 track and field, and Grand Prairie had I actually went to school with his dad, Don. So did your dad, Don Marshall. His son, Donald Marshall, was his track and field guy. He was a freshman in high school. He went down to state and he won the 100 and the 200. And that same night, Grand Prairie had a hurdler named Brian Dubisky, John Dubisky's son, school named after. Brian won the 110 hurdles. Grand Prairie had 3 gold medal winners on that night.
Wow.
And of course, Don Marshall was a freshman. So I remember the Fort Worth Star Telegram came up to Grand Prairie track coach, Tony Burley. He says, why didn't you tell? I said, how come we didn't know about these times these guys are running? He says, I sent them to you all season long. You just wouldn't run them.
Like, this is not a surprise.
Yeah.
You've had them.
Yeah, your fault. Not mine. I sent them to you. So.
Man, that brings a good point. So, like, there have been a lot of professional athletes that have come out of Grand Prairie.
Oh, yeah.
There's been a lot of Olympic athletes. Have
Jennifer McFalls.
Jennifer McFalls.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever do spotlights in any of them? Is that something that you would do?
Jennifer McFalls, I do remember doing. We didn't get to use color photos very often. It was kind of weird, but we had the ability on. I remember they saw it coming. They said like in a week or so, you can have color. So I set up a deal with our staff photographer, John Wilson, and we got Jennifer McFalls, and what the idea was going to be how versatile she was. She played all the sports. She was softball, volleyball, I don't know what else. She was good at everything. So we had a picture with all the balls, and she was kind of juggling all the balls. I still remember the picture.
What a neat idea!
Yeah. And so that picture ran, and I did lots of stories on her after that. But that was the first time I did a feature story on her. But then when she got involved in it, she was a softball player at A&M. We would. What I would try to do back then was, in the summertime when there wasn't really high school sports going on, I would try to catch up with athletes that were in college.
Oh, right.
Try to find out how they were doing and everything. That was what I always hoped to do. Get stuff in the summer from people that I couldn't see quite daily.
What a great idea. That's a great idea. So do you have any suggestions for young journalists that are in high school right now?
It's a really bad time right now for journalists. The way things are going, I hate to be negative, but the full-time jobs are much fewer. What the papers tend to do now is they'll use outside people. And I'm one of them. I love it. I still get to cover events and so forth. But as far as the future in the business, I don't know that it's kind of scary right now.
It's almost like you have to have, like, if there's an article or something that goes out, like in the Wall Street Journal or something like that, you almost have to have like an accompaniment. Either it's a special docu-series or it's a podcast accompaniment to that particular thing. Or there has to be a lot more information, it seems like.
Well, one thing for sure I would say is, the more social media exposure you have, the better you're going to be. That tends to be something now that is much more important. It was not important at all when I came along.
Right.
So the more things you can get out there and let people know who you are and what you think, that's more important. In the old days, your opinion was really not supposed to come out that much. What you actually thought was way secondary to what happened.
To actually reporting.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot depends on if you're talking about news, you're talking about sports. Sports is a little different.
Yeah.
It's not quite. It's not so cut. It's not so angry like news is.
Because it's statistics. It's somebody won, somebody lost. This is the score. There's not a whole lot of opinion that goes into that.
But even like the Astros controversy now or something like that, it just seems like they make much more. It seems like it's a bigger deal now than it used to be.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I don't know if it would have been quite the story. Now there's so many guys that just want to leap in there and throw their opinion in. The guys on ESPN.
And be the first one to do it.
Right.
Like regardless of if it's right or if I'm even reporting it correctly.
Right. We've got to have an opinion on this. Now,
Right.
So, you be the bad guy, I'll be the good guy. That's what it seems like they do to me. Those shows just wear me out. I don't know about you.
Oh my gosh, totally.
I don't get into it. I like to turn the game on right when the first play's going, and then right when the last play's on. I don't want to hear pregame. I don't want to hear any of that. I want to see the ball game.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for sitting down with me, Randy.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
It's been great.
I'm glad we had such a nice day for it too.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
Are you going to play pickleball?
I've got my paddle, but I'm going to do a little working out.
Well, there you go. Well, enjoy your rest of your day. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.